Sometimes the smallest gesture speaks louder than words, Ethan Miller whispered, his voice barely rising above the chatter in the little bakery at the corner of Willow Street. The warm summer air drifted in through the open door, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread and vanilla icing, mingling with the faint hum of the ceiling fan overhead. Sunlight spilled across the worn wooden tables, catching the golden frosting on a birthday cake that Lily Miller, his 8-year-old daughter, had been eagerly guarding all morning. Ethan wiped his calloused hands on his faded jeans and leaned down to Lily's level. "Do you think anyone would like a piece?" he asked softly, glancing at the quiet woman sitting alone at the edge of the room. Clara Hastings, a stranger in every sense of the word, had been observing them with an unreadable expression, a slight crease between her brows, her hands wrapped loosely around a steaming cup of tea. She looked like she belonged somewhere far more important, but here she was, a solitary figure amid the laughter and clatter of local families celebrating ordinary moments. Lily's eyes, bright and trusting, sparkled as she pointed toward Clara. "Daddy, she looks hungry." Ethan felt a tug at his chest, the familiar pull of empathy that had guided him through years of long hours and lonely nights. He cut a generous slice of the chocolate cake, the frosting smooth and sweet, and extended it toward Clara. "Here," he said, his tone calm, steady, and intentionally gentle, "you can have this." Clara's gray eyes widened just slightly, a flicker of surprise passing over her otherwise composed face. She hesitated, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Around them, the room's energy shifted subtly, a few curious glances were cast their way, whispers that mingled with the soft hum of the oven timer and the muted clinking of coffee cups. Some patrons raised eyebrows, smirked, or exchanged quiet chuckles, but Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't announce his gesture or seek recognition. His actions were quiet, deliberate, carried out with the kind of dignity that only comes from years of choosing kindness over attention. Lily leaned forward eagerly, her small hands folded politely, her face lit with the unfiltered joy of sharing, while Ethan's steady presence radiated calm. Clara accepted the plate with a soft, "Thank you," her voice barely audible. Almost lost in the background chatter, yet weighted with an unexpected warmth. She took a tentative bite, and for a brief moment, the world outside that bakery seemed to fade. The sunlight caught her hair, revealing subtle chestnut highlights, and the faintest crease of a smile softened her features. Ethan straightened slightly, watching without expectation, appreciating the silent exchange unfolding before him. He returned to Lily, who beamed up at him, eyes full of innocent delight, and whispered, "Daddy, she really liked it." The simplicity of the moment, the quiet act of generosity, resonated through the small space like a gentle echo. In the back corner, a waiter paused mid-step, glancing over at the pair, a hint of admiration in his eyes. Clara, meanwhile, sipped her tea delicately, her mind occupied with thoughts she did not voice, her presence carrying an air of unspoken authority that went unnoticed by most, yet Ethan sensed it instinctively. There was something more to her, a hidden depth, a story untold. And though he didn't know it yet, that simple act of offering a slice of birthday cake would set in motion a chain of events that neither he nor Lily could have imagined, an unfolding of quiet miracles and the revelation of Clara Hastings' secret identity, one that would leave the town stunned and forever change the course of lives intertwined by this single, gentle gesture. Ethan Miller watched quietly as Lily took a small bite of her slice, her eyes lighting up with a joy that seemed to fill the entire bakery. The room buzzed softly with the ambient hum of conversations and the occasional clink of utensils, yet around their table there was a stillness, a gentle pause in the ordinary rhythm of the morning. Clara Hastings set her plate down, a hint of a smile lingering as she glanced toward Ethan and Lily, an acknowledgement that needed no words. Ethan adjusted the napkin beneath Lily's tiny hands, ensuring that her chocolate-smeared fingers would not leave a mark on the worn tabletop. He could feel the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the windows, the golden hue casting a quiet glow on the frosting, on Clara's carefully composed features, and on the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. Each breath carried the subtle scent of vanilla and sugar, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh coffee, creating a sensory backdrop that seemed almost cinematic. Ethan's mind wandered briefly to the weeks of preparation leading up to this morning, the long drives to the bakery, the careful planning of games and small gifts, all for the sake of giving Lily a moment of happiness. Clara's eyes, however, held a weight that contrasted sharply with the simplicity of the celebration, a depth that Ethan could sense without understanding, as though she carried stories untold and experiences unshared. Lily giggled softly, pointing to the decorations Ethan had carefully arranged, and Ethan responded with a warm, quiet chuckle, letting his presence reassure her that this was a safe, joyful space. Around them, the bakery staff moved with practiced efficiency, glancing occasionally at the table, but giving space where respect for private moments could unfold. Clara stirred her tea with gentle, precise movements, her eyes occasionally flicking toward Ethan, a silent assessment or perhaps a quiet curiosity, never crossing the line into intrusion. Ethan observed without comment, recognizing that the subtle exchange between them was its own form of communication, a dialogue of gestures and glances that needed no voice. The background chatter faded into a soft murmur, punctuated by the distant ring of the bakery door as a new customer entered, carrying the faint scent of fresh air and the warmth of the outside sun. Lily leaned against Ethan's shoulder, a small sigh of contentment escaping her lips, and he responded with a gentle squeeze of her hand, grounding both of them in the moment. Clara rose slightly in her seat, a subtle movement that suggested attentiveness without imposing, and Ethan nodded in acknowledgement, maintaining the calm, unassuming demeanor that defined his quiet strength. The moment stretched, not in tension, but in the gentle unfolding of human connection, each person present aware of the small yet significant gestures being exchanged. Ethan felt the familiar pulse of gratitude, not for recognition, but for the simple act of seeing another human being, for the momentary bridge built between himself, his daughter, and the stranger who had entered their morning. Outside, sunlight shifted across the street, casting long, warm shadows that painted the walls of the bakery in hues of amber and gold. Clara's eyes met Ethan's for a brief instant, a silent acknowledgement of shared humanity, before she looked down at her plate again, the faintest smile still present, a hint of the unexpected story that would soon unfold from this quiet morning act. Lily's laughter rang softly as she took another bite, and Ethan's chest warmed with the steady, grounding sensation of doing right, of teaching his daughter the unspoken power of kindness, patience, and quiet dignity in a world that often overlooked such moments. Ethan Miller carefully guided Lily toward the window seat where the morning sunlight poured in like a golden river, brushing across her hair and warming the soft curves of her cheeks. Clara Hastings remained at the corner table, her posture poised, hands folded neatly, but there was a subtle shift in her expression, a softening that Ethan could sense without a word being exchanged. The bakery around them continued its quiet rhythm, the soft murmur of conversation, the clink of cups, and the gentle hum of the ceiling fan weaving a tapestry of ordinary life that contrasted sharply with the extraordinary tension carried in this small moment. Ethan's mind drifted briefly to the months he had spent planning Lily's birthday, the careful touches, the homemade decorations, the little notes he had hidden for her to discover. Each effort, each small act of love, had been done in quiet hope, a hope that kindness could create ripples far beyond immediate recognition. Lily leaned forward slightly, her small hands tracing the edge of the window ledge, her gaze flicking to Clara with an innocent curiosity that only a child could maintain without judgment. Clara looked back, her gray eyes flickering with an emotion that Ethan could not name, a mixture of gratitude, surprise, and something deeper, something tied to a story she had not yet shared. The scent of vanilla and fresh bread seemed to linger in the air, mingling with the subtle warmth of sunlight and the faint aroma of brewed coffee, grounding the moment in sensory reality. Ethan shifted in his seat, adjusting the small quilt draped across Lily's lap, careful to keep the frosting from smearing, his movements deliberate and calm, reflecting a lifetime of learned patience and quiet attention to detail. The subtle sounds of the bakery, the scrape of a chair, the soft thud of a tray being set down, the hushed laughter of a child in another corner, created a rhythm that matched the gentle pulse of the moment, each note underscoring the significance of simple acts carried out with dignity. Clara sipped her tea, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of the cup, and for a brief instant, her attention seemed wholly absorbed in the quiet generosity displayed before her, the simple offering of a piece of cake bridging the gap between strangers. Ethan's eyes lingered on her face, noting the faint crease of a smile, the reflective glimmer in her eyes, sensing that beneath the composed exterior lay a story waiting to emerge. Lily laughed softly, the sound delicate and melodic, breaking the silence in a way that felt natural, effortless, and grounding, and Ethan responded with a small nod, acknowledging the joy radiating from his daughter and allowing himself a quiet moment of pride. Around them, the other patrons moved through their routines, some glancing briefly, some not noticing at all, and yet the weight of this unspoken exchange carried a quiet significance, a lesson in empathy, patience, and the unexpected connections that could arise from moments of generosity. Ethan leaned back slightly, his shoulders easing as he watched Lily finish her bite, the subtle satisfaction in her expression mirrored by the gentle warmth spreading through him. Clara placed her cup down with precision, a silent gesture of completion, and for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of shared understanding, a recognition that what had begun as a simple act had planted the seeds of something far greater, a ripple of kindness whose effects neither he nor Lily could yet fully comprehend. The sunlight shifted slowly, brushing across the tables, illuminating the small space with a gentle glow, and in that light, Ethan allowed himself to feel the quiet power of goodness, the unspoken promise that simple acts of generosity, executed with dignity and grace, could alter the course of lives in ways that would only be revealed in their own time. Ethan Miller stood slowly, allowing Lily to adjust her chair so she could reach the edge of the table comfortably, her small hands grasping the sides as she balanced her plate. The soft hum of the bakery continued around them, a mixture of quiet conversations, the faint hiss of the espresso machine, and the rhythmic scraping of spoons against ceramic. Ethan's eyes flicked once toward Clara Hastings, who was now sitting with a subtle shift in posture, leaning slightly forward, as if absorbing the atmosphere and the quiet energy that emanated from the father and daughter. The sunlight had moved slightly, casting elongated patterns on the worn wooden floor, highlighting the gentle swirl of flour dust still lingering in the warm air from the morning baking. Ethan noticed the faint crease on Clara's forehead soften, a small sign that she was beginning to let down the guard she had maintained until now. Lily, oblivious to any tension, clutched a small fork with a piece of cake and offered it toward Clara. "Do you want some more?" she asked softly, her voice carrying an innocence and openness that seemed to cut through the unspoken barrier between them. Clara hesitated, then took the offered piece, her fingers brushing lightly against Lily's. The contact was brief, yet it held a quiet significance that Ethan understood intuitively. He shifted his weight slightly in his chair, resting his hands on his knees, and allowed the silence to settle around them, a calm and deliberate space that spoke louder than words ever could. Outside the window, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves on the trees lining Willow Street, brushing a soft rustling sound against the glass and mixing with the faint scent of summer blossoms drifting in through the open door. Ethan felt a sense of alignment, a rare moment in which the ordinary surroundings, the chipped paint on the counter, the faded menu board, the hum of refrigerators, became a backdrop for a quietly profound exchange of generosity and presence. Clara lifted her teacup, pausing to look at Ethan, and in that glance there was a depth, a subtle acknowledgement that she had not expected to encounter such sincerity and simplicity in the world. Ethan's mind wandered to the years of patience, of quiet endurance, of choosing to act with dignity rather than seeking attention or reward, and he felt a calm satisfaction, a quiet pride that this principle of living had found expression in something so immediate and human. Lily laughed softly as she nudged Ethan with her elbow, a gentle reminder that the day was hers, that the moment of sharing was as much about celebration as it was about connection. Clara's eyes followed the interaction with a softening intensity, the faintest trace of warmth in her expression, and Ethan realized that a small bridge had formed between strangers, forged not through elaborate gestures but through simple attentiveness, shared care, and the unspoken acknowledgement of one another's presence. The soft sunlight, the aroma of sweet cake, the murmur of the patrons, and the gentle movements of Lily created a sense of harmony, a rhythm that carried Ethan's thoughts toward an understanding that life's meaningful moments often arrived quietly, without fanfare, and that the smallest acts could carry the weight of unanticipated significance. As Clara took another small bite and returned her attention to Ethan and Lily, a subtle connection lingered, the invisible thread of shared humanity stretching across the table, hinting at the unfolding story yet to reveal itself in the quiet acknowledgement of kindness, attention, and the steady presence of dignity that Ethan Miller carried naturally in his every action. Ethan Miller gently guided Lily back to the corner of the bakery where the sunlight hit the floorboards at a warm, slanted angle, catching the floating dust in a soft glow that made the simple space feel golden and alive. Clara Hastings had shifted slightly in her seat, one hand resting loosely on the edge of the table, the other holding her teacup, and her gaze seemed to settle on the way Ethan interacted with his daughter, observing the careful, quiet way he adjusted her napkin and straightened her tiny sleeve. The hum of the bakery continued around them, muted conversations, the faint hiss of the espresso machine, and the subtle clinking of ceramic plates creating a soothing rhythm that seemed to underscore the calm dignity of the moment. Ethan could feel Lily's small hand curl around his as she leaned against him, her trust evident in her relaxed posture, and he felt a surge of quiet pride in the way she absorbed this gentle lesson in kindness. Clara's eyes flicked toward the door, catching a slant of light that illuminated her features, and for a moment, there was a softness in her expression, the hint of an unexpected connection forming across the space between them. The scent of vanilla icing and fresh bread lingered in the air, blending with the faint aroma of coffee, grounding the scene in the sensory reality of the bakery while the subtle interplay of glances, gestures, and unspoken communication created a quiet emotional resonance. Ethan adjusted his own posture, leaning slightly back to give space while remaining attentive, his eyes flicking from Lily to Clara and back, noting the subtle expressions, the slight curve of a smile, the pause in her movements as if she were processing something more profound than mere gratitude. Outside, the soft rustle of leaves in the morning breeze brushed against the window, carrying the distant sounds of the street, the occasional car, the faint laughter of pedestrians, creating a gentle backdrop to the quiet unfolding of human connection inside. Lily giggled softly as she reached for another small bite of cake, and Ethan's heart lifted with the sound, a simple moment of joy made luminous by the care and presence surrounding it. Clara took her cup in both hands for a moment, letting it rest lightly against her lips, and her eyes met Ethan's in a brief, silent acknowledgement that seemed to communicate more than words ever could. The interplay of warmth, attention, and unspoken respect filled the space around them, giving the moment a weight and clarity that lingered quietly in the edges of their awareness. Ethan observed the way Clara's gaze softened, the slight lift of her chin, the gentle attentiveness as she watched Lily, and he felt the invisible threads of connection weaving a subtle bond across the table. Each breath, each small gesture, the tilt of a head, the careful placement of a fork, the quiet adjustment of a chair, added to the quiet narrative unfolding between them, the narrative of generosity, empathy, and the understated power of human dignity. The sun continued its slow climb, casting a warm, shifting light that made the frosting on Lily's plate glimmer, the wooden surfaces of the tables glow softly, and the floating dust particles dance like tiny sparks. In this gentle illumination, Ethan understood that the moment's significance lay not in grandeur or recognition but in the quiet affirmation of human goodness, the invisible, enduring mark left on those who witness and receive it, and the unspoken promise that even small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways yet unseen, shaping lives and hearts in subtle, profound ways. Ethan Miller shifted slightly in his seat, ensuring Lily's chair was steady beneath her as she reached for the last small piece of cake, her delicate fingers careful not to disturb the frosting. Clara Hastings observed with quiet attention, her gray eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and something gentler, a warmth that had slowly begun to emerge since the morning had started. The bakery around them moved in its soft rhythm, the muted conversations and distant clatter of dishes forming a comforting background that framed the unfolding scene. Ethan felt the familiar pulse of responsibility and tenderness, the unspoken promise to guide Lily through life with patience and care, letting her learn kindness through example rather than instruction. Lily offered the remaining bite of her cake to Clara, who accepted it with a subtle nod, her lips curving slightly in a smile that spoke more than words could convey. Sunlight filtered through the windows, painting the wooden floors with long, amber streaks, highlighting the tiny motes of dust suspended in the air like gentle sparks, and casting a warm glow across the frosting of the cake and the small hands that had offered it. Ethan adjusted the napkin under Lily's elbow, careful in his quiet gestures, each movement deliberate, a reflection of the steady rhythm of his life shaped by years of care, work, and quiet determination. Clara took a sip of her tea, her gaze lifting occasionally to meet Ethan's, the exchange brief but meaningful, a recognition of integrity and the simple power of thoughtful action. The faint hum of the ceiling fan mixed with the soft rustling of leaves outside the bakery, carrying a subtle breeze that drifted in through the open door, creating a gentle soundtrack that seemed to emphasize the unspoken connection forming at the corner table. Lily's laughter, light and genuine, punctuated the quiet atmosphere, a sound that drew a soft smile from Ethan, grounding him in the joy of the present moment and the comfort of shared humanity. Clara's attention remained partly on the child, partly on Ethan, as if observing the subtle dance of their interaction, the give and take of gestures and glances that required no explanation. Ethan noticed the slight relaxation of her posture, the way her shoulders eased, the quiet acknowledgement in her eyes that this small act of sharing, carried out with dignity and care, held a significance that extended beyond the bakery walls. Outside, the sunlight continued its slow climb, shifting the shadows across the room, highlighting the delicate swirl of frosting, the edge of Lily's plate, the careful placement of Clara's teacup, all details that seemed mundane yet were filled with quiet meaning. Ethan felt a deep, calm satisfaction, the quiet knowledge that kindness, unannounced and unsought for reward, had created a subtle but profound bond in the space between them, a gentle current connecting father, daughter, and stranger through the simple acts of attention, care, and shared humanity. The room's background sounds continued softly, the occasional murmur of conversation, the distant scrape of a chair, and the soft clinking of cups forming a gentle accompaniment to the scene. Ethan watched as Clara placed her fork down with precision, her eyes meeting his in a fleeting but significant moment, a shared recognition of the grace and dignity that could exist in simple, quiet acts, and he knew, without speaking, that this morning had set in motion the first steps of a connection that would reveal deeper truths and unexpected stories in the moments yet to come. Ethan Miller noticed the subtle shift in Clara Hastings' posture as she finished the last sip of her tea, the faint warmth of her expression betraying a hint of curiosity that had begun to blossom into something more attentive. The bakery around them continued its gentle rhythm, the soft murmur of conversations and the occasional scrape of a chair creating a comforting cadence that framed the moment between the three of them. Lily Miller, perched on her small chair, leaned forward eagerly, her eyes sparkling with uncontained excitement as she carefully arranged her party favors along the edge of the table, her fingers moving with the precision of a child who had spent the morning anticipating this moment. Ethan adjusted his own position, leaning slightly back while keeping his hands close, an instinctive posture that allowed him to remain both present and unobtrusive, a quiet anchor in the unfolding scene. The sunlight streaming through the windows cast a warm glow across the frosting of the cake, the soft fabric of Lily's dress, and the polished wood of the table, highlighting the small, deliberate gestures that conveyed thoughtfulness, attentiveness, and respect. Clara's gray eyes followed the interaction with an intensity that was subtle yet undeniable, a silent acknowledgement of Ethan's unspoken principle of dignity, of nurturing, of allowing actions to speak louder than words. Outside, the gentle rustle of the leaves in the summer breeze drifted in through the open door, carrying with it the scent of fresh-cut grass and the faint aroma of pastries from the neighboring shop, creating a layered sensory environment that emphasized the quiet intimacy of the moment. Ethan watched as Lily carefully offered Clara a small handmade card, her delicate fingers trembling slightly with anticipation, and Clara's eyes softened as she accepted it, a fleeting connection passing between them that did not require words but conveyed understanding, respect, and an unspoken bond forming in real time. The room's ambient noises faded into the background as the subtle cadence of interaction took precedence, Ethan's calm and measured breathing syncing with the rhythm of Lily's small, excited movements, and the soft, reflective glances Clara offered in response. Ethan could feel the quiet weight of responsibility and love in his chest, the steady, grounding force of years spent shaping his life to provide for Lily, to demonstrate patience, generosity, and the understated power of human kindness. Clara's posture relaxed further, a slight lean forward, a subtle smile gracing her lips, acknowledging both the child's innocence and the father's integrity. Ethan's eyes followed her gaze, noting the careful observation and the faint glimmer of recognition that suggested she was beginning to see more than just a casual gesture, perhaps sensing the depth of character beneath his calm exterior. The interplay of sunlight, shadows, and the small, intentional actions, the placement of a napkin, the gentle adjustment of Lily's sleeve, the careful offering of cake and card, wove together into a tableau of understated grace, a scene that resonated with quiet dignity and the subtle promise of meaningful connection. Ethan felt the warmth of this small exchange extend beyond the table, a recognition that the choices we make in moments of quiet generosity carry ripples that may not be visible immediately but hold the potential to transform lives in ways we cannot yet see. The soft chorus of laughter from another table, the distant hum of conversation, and the ambient clink of utensils framed the continuing tableau as the morning sunlight continued to illuminate the space, capturing the gentle unfolding of empathy, attentiveness, and the delicate, unspoken connections that wove Ethan, Lily, and Clara together in that quiet, transformative moment. Ethan Miller noticed the subtle change in the light as the morning sun climbed higher, casting a warm, golden hue across the wooden floors and the soft frosting of Lily's partially eaten birthday cake. Clara Hastings sat back slightly, her hands resting gently on her teacup, her posture calm but attentive, as if she were absorbing every detail of the quiet interaction before her. The bakery continued its rhythm, the faint hum of conversation, the soft clink of utensils, and the occasional scrape of a chair forming a gentle background score that highlighted the intimacy of the moment. Ethan leaned toward Lily, adjusting the small bow on her dress, his hands careful and deliberate, a reflection of the steady, thoughtful presence he carried with him through years of parenting and quiet work. Lily giggled softly, her fingers brushing crumbs from the edge of her plate, and Ethan smiled, his eyes crinkling with warmth as he watched her delight in simple joys. Clara's gaze followed these movements with an intensity that was gentle but unmistakable, a quiet recognition of character, of integrity, and of the subtle strength in Ethan's unspoken guidance. Outside the open windows, a gentle summer breeze stirred the leaves on the trees lining the street, carrying with it the scent of fresh flowers and the faint aroma of bread from the nearby ovens, mingling with the sweet scent of vanilla and chocolate in the bakery itself. Ethan noticed the way Clara's eyes softened as she reached for her napkin, smoothing it over the table in a delicate motion, a small gesture that mirrored the care he had displayed throughout the morning. The sunlight highlighted the dust motes in the air, floating lazily like tiny sparks of light, emphasizing the quiet, almost cinematic quality of the moment. Ethan shifted slightly, his attention never leaving Lily, yet aware of the subtle cues in Clara's demeanor, the way her gaze flicked with interest, curiosity, and a hint of awe at the calm dignity in which he navigated the space around them. Lily clapped her hands together softly, drawing a small, approving smile from Clara, whose gray eyes shimmered with a faint warmth that was both unexpected and quietly profound. Ethan felt the grounding weight of the moment, the understanding that these simple, intentional gestures, sharing a slice of cake, adjusting a napkin, maintaining a calm presence, were rippling outward in ways that were not yet visible, carrying lessons of kindness, empathy, and silent strength. The distant sounds of the street filtered through the open door, the faint laughter of children and the soft rumble of passing cars creating a gentle undercurrent that framed the space with the ordinary cadence of daily life, while the extraordinary unfolding of human connection continued quietly at their table. Ethan watched as Clara offered a small, fleeting smile toward Lily, the acknowledgement unspoken but powerful, and he realized that the morning had become more than a simple celebration, it had become a moment of resonance, where quiet attention, dignity, and the subtle power of generosity created a bridge between lives that had previously been strangers, a connection that promised the unfolding of stories yet to be revealed, with all the quiet grace of ordinary goodness meeting extraordinary circumstance. Ethan Miller took a deep breath, feeling the warm sunlight fill the bakery with a golden glow that seemed to hold the quiet energy of the morning in place. Lily, her small hands still dusted with frosting, leaned against him with a soft sigh of contentment, her eyes reflecting the simple joy that came from a day filled with care, attention, and small wonders. Clara Hastings finally set her teacup down, a subtle, deliberate movement, and for the first time she allowed herself to fully relax, her shoulders easing, her expression softening as she observed the natural, unassuming dignity that Ethan carried in every gesture. The hum of the bakery continued as a gentle background, the low murmur of conversation, the distant clatter of dishes, and the occasional squeak of a chair creating a rhythm that underscored the delicate unfolding of human connection at the corner table. Ethan adjusted Lily's napkin, smoothing the edges with deliberate care, and glanced at Clara, noticing the flicker of curiosity and quiet admiration in her gray eyes. Outside, the summer breeze carried the faint scent of flowering trees, mingling with the aroma of baked bread and warm vanilla that filled the air, creating a sensory atmosphere that made the moment feel intimate, almost suspended in time. Lily offered a small piece of paper she had drawn on earlier, her tiny fingers extending it toward Clara, who accepted it with a soft nod, her eyes glimmering with appreciation for the child's simple, earnest gesture. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction in watching this exchange, recognizing that the power of small acts of kindness and attention could ripple outward far beyond the moment itself. The sunlight shifted across the room, highlighting the gentle curves of the cake, the smooth surface of the table, and the subtle expressions on each of their faces, creating an almost cinematic tableau of ordinary life infused with extraordinary quiet grace. Clara's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile, and for a fleeting instant, Ethan sensed the weight of unspoken understanding passing between them, a recognition of integrity, compassion, and the subtle power of human dignity. Lily's laughter, soft and musical, filled the space, drawing a matching smile from Ethan, and Clara's eyes followed, a reflection of the joy and warmth that even small, thoughtful gestures could inspire. The soft murmur of other patrons, the hum of conversation, and the ambient clinking of utensils receded into the background, allowing the quiet resonance of shared humanity to take precedence, a gentle reminder of the importance of presence, attentiveness, and the careful, deliberate cultivation of kindness. Ethan adjusted his chair slightly, letting his gaze rest on Clara, who seemed to be taking in the simplicity of the moment, the subtle dignity with which he moved, the way he guided his daughter, and the gentle affirmation of values lived rather than spoken. The warmth of the sun, the soft laughter, and the muted energy of the bakery combined into a quiet harmony, an invisible thread connecting the three of them in a shared experience of generosity, respect, and the slow unfolding of trust. As the light shifted toward the windows, casting long, soft shadows across the floor, Ethan felt the steady, calming certainty that this morning, though ordinary in appearance, had created a ripple of lasting significance, an affirmation that dignity, quiet strength, and genuine kindness carried a weight that could be felt, understood, and remembered long after the moment itself had passed.